faithfully sharing value, exploring great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, I'll be diving into the book Money Dark Flow for you. The hidden billionaire behind the rise of America's radical right is Jane Mayer, a top-notch American financial investigative journalist. She's a columnist for The New Yorker and used to be a White House reporter for The Wall Street Journal. She spent almost 10 years tracking the political meddling of Charles Koch and David Koch, who control Koch Industries, the second largest private company in the U.S. Through deep digging, she exposed their secret moves, showing how the Koch brothers shifted their political ideas from the fringe to the heart of American politics. Her reports on them won the National Magazine Award, which is up there with the Pulitzer Prize. Money Dark Flow. This book also made the shortlist for the National Book Critics Circle Award multiple times. It won the National Book Award and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Plus, it was named one of Time magazine's top 10 best books of the year. What Mayer calls money dark flow refers to huge amounts of cash illegally getting into U.S. politics. Under current U.S. law, each citizen can't donate more than $200 to a political party for campaigns, and they have to disclose where every penny goes. But the Koch brothers exploit loopholes using sneaky channels to pump billions into funding political stuff. The author dubs this money, where the public doesn't know how it's used or how much exceeds limits, dark money or hidden cash. So, why are the Koch brothers pouring big dark money into political activities? There are two reasons. First, they're ultra-rich billionaires in the U.S., and their businesses raked in $115 billion in revenue back in 2017. Any U.S. government move to hike taxes or tighten environmental rules would hit their massive industries hard. Second, their dad taught him from childhood that if the government crosses the line and meddles too much in society, it spells big trouble. As they grew up, the brothers totally bought into that. The mastermind of the Austrian school, which pushes for hands-off economics, Hayek's ideas say that government control always leads to market crashes and is a path to slavery. The Koch brothers feel that as industry reps, they've got every reason to step up and warn folks to stay alert, stopping the government from overstepping and trampling on people's freedoms and interests. Driven by this dual motivation of profit and belief, the Koch brothers built a multi-tiered action network like an octopus. The brain of this octopus is the various foundations, think tanks, and academic institutions funded by Koch, which provide the core ideas. The various foundations, lobbying groups, polling agencies, and media conglomerates controlled by the brothers are the tentacles of this octopus. The Koch octopus extends its tentacles to tightly grasp a group of billionaire fans on its periphery. These billionaires are captivated by the Koch brothers' strategic vision and their efficient political meddling tactics, generously funding political candidates favored by the Koch brothers. This makes the Koch brothers a key link connecting the American political and industrial sectors. Data cited by the author shows that in the U.S., 1 out of every $4 in political donations is linked to the Koch brothers. Next, we'll explore the Koch octopus's organizational structure, the Koch brothers' methods of using dark money for political interference, and how the dark money flow undermines American democracy. Toke 1, Shadows. These three aspects will help us understand money dark flow. First, let's discuss the organizational structure of the Koch octopus. As of 2016, this network had 1,600 employees across 35 states, covering 80% of the U.S. population. The wages paid by the Koch brothers to them are higher than the salary expenses of the Republican National Committee. The Koch octopus has 3 sets of tentacles for political interference. The first set uses money to establish academic funding programs in universities and research institutions. Various research centers, reading clubs, and think tanks. Famous think tanks under Koch brothers' control include the Cato Institute, the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, and so on. Mm. Funds invested by the Koch brothers in such organizations are tax deductible, but these institutions cannot directly engage in campaign-related activities. They only write research papers, press releases, and op-ed to provide ideological products to society. The second set of tentacles for the Koch octopus is various foundations, generally divided into two types. One is funds that can publicly participate in campaigns, like the Koch Political Action Committee. The second type is public welfare foundations, under the guise of charity with various names. Most of the dark money raised by the Koch brothers flows into these foundations to achieve tax avoidance and bypass regulations. The names of the second type of funds sound very appealing, completely unrelated to politics. For example, American Crossroads GPS, Center for Patient Rights, and American Innovation Association. Of course, some foundation names are confusing, like TC4 Trust and Koch brothers. The dark money raised from the industry gets shuffled around among second type funds and then flows into campaign funding pools for various parties, PACs, that is, political action committees. This achieves tax avoidance and masks the source of political cash. For instance, the Center for Patient Rights mentioned earlier, according to its accounts, didn't spend a dime on campaign ads or send any dollars directly to the Republican PAC's account. But during just the 2012 midterm elections, it allocated $103 million to other funds to indirectly meddle in the elections. Ironic, concise tone. The third set of tentacles for the Koch octopus includes various street movement organizations represented by one called Americans for Prosperity. The Koch brothers aim to portray it as a nonpartisan, grassroots civil group. However, through investigation, the author reveals that behind every street activity by Americans for Prosperity, Koch octopus funds cover transportation and logistics costs. The Koch octopus also incorporated 17 conservative civil organizations through financial support, including Freedom Initiative targeting Hispanic voters, Concerned Women for America, Engaging Female Voters, Generation Opportunity for Millennials, and True the Vote promoting higher voter turnout, among others. The author laments that the Koch brothers have essentially built their own private political party. However, the real power of the Koch octopus lies in its peripheral influence. As the main producer of laissez-faire ideology in America, the Koch octopus attracts a large group of like-minded billionaires who contribute money and effort to support the Koch brothers' political meddling. During every presidential election and congressional midterms, the fundraising summits hosted by the Koch brothers in Palm Springs, Florida, become the center of American political life. In the 2016 election, the Koch brothers listed 32 donors among billionaires vying to contribute, including financial mogul Charles Schwab, Amway chairman Richard DeVos, coal tycoon Joe Kraft, oil magnate Robertson family, and casino magnates from Las Vegas, among others. Such formidable fundraising power left Republican politicians desperate for campaign funds, unable to remain indifferent. During the 2016 election, Republican establishment politicians flocked to Charles Koch's California villa for secret meetings. Trump even tweeted once, mocking all Republican candidates heading to California to raise money. "I wish you luck. Are you puppets?" All right, that covers the basics of the Koch octopus. Now let's explore how the Koch brothers use their massive wealth to interfere in American politics. The Koch brothers' first tactic is manufacturing laissez-faire ideology to reshape America's political correctness. The Koch octopus's layered tentacles meddle in every aspect of American society, starting with the nation's brain. Through funding research, creating disciplines, guiding students, and establishing centers, the Koch Foundation reversed public suspicion of industrial tycoons since the Progressive Era. The Progressive Movement refers to early 20th century political actions against monopolistic capitalists pursuing power equality. Thus, the Kochs crafted new political correctness. Only laissez-faire economics and limited government could bring American prosperity. The Kochs grew their empire from millions to billions, largely by reshaping America's political correctness. Through their influence, public trust in private enterprises surpassed trust in government. In the 1960s and 70s, as the Kochs inherited their fortune and began managing the business, American corporations faced tremendous pressure. In 1962, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring exposed DDT's environmental devastation, sowing seeds for environmental and consumer rights movements. In following years, Congress passed numerous acts, including the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act. The Nixon administration established the EPA, prioritizing public interest over corporate costs in environmental matters. As America shifted from laissez-faire to regulated governance, Koch Industries faced multiple pollution lawsuits and fines, overwhelming the brothers until advisors helped them identify corporate enemies. In university classrooms, media, and research institutions, those left-wing intellectuals advocating for equal rights and demanding corporations pay for environmental pollution are their deadliest enemies. Rather than constantly battling in court, they chose to become architects of a new ideology. The Koch brothers decided to influence American minds at the source. They donated $30 million to George Mason University in Virginia, bringing Austrian schoolmasters advocating free market economics to establish the Mercatus Center for Economic Research. Since then, this think tank, alongside another Koch-affiliated think tank, Cato, became the policy incubator for tax cuts under Reagan and George W. Bush administrations. The Koch brothers focus on ideological indoctrination starting from young minds. For example, in Koch-funded research projects, students' papers undergo computerized keyword scanning. Papers meeting keyword frequency thresholds for liberal economists like Hayek and Milton Friedman get rated excellent and receive scholarships. The Koch brothers also sponsored Ivy League schools like Brown University to design freshman courses exclusively discussing free market economics, implanting preconceived beliefs in young academics to mainstream libertarianism. By 2015, Koch funds sponsored programs at 307 universities, funding 800 professors while violating academic independence traditions. They maintain editorial control over funded projects, which are highly targeted, mostly challenging taxes. Research undermining environmentalism, consumer rights, and equal rights movements. Mass media became another ideological battleground for Koch interference through media investigating and influencing editorial policies. They placed right-wing thinkers as commentators in outlets like the New York Times. The Koch Foundation's long-term media investments enable effective media pressure on government to influence policies. For instance, when an Obama donor received huge green energy subsidies, the Koch octopus exploited this scandal, spending $2.4 million on widespread ads to amplify impact, ultimately forcing Congress to cut renewable subsidies and reshape political correctness. The final step is to spread libertarian ideas to the public through street movements. Charles Koch gave a speech in 1999. He said that if ideas like liberty and limited government stay stuck in ivory towers, even the greatest thoughts are useless. The Coke octopus uses behind the scenes tricks to bring these ideas to the streets and win public support. The Tea Party movement is their signature work. Tea as in tea leaves, party as in political party. During Obama's 2 terms, Tea Party movements often erupted in major U.S. cities. Tea Party protesters, copying the Boston Tea Party that fought British colonial taxes, hit the streets demanding an end to green energy subsidies and blocking the Affordable Care Act. By calling for cuts in federal spending and big tax breaks, the author exposes that these so-called grassroots street movements weren't organic. They were mostly the Koch brothers doing. It's artificial turf, paved with checks. Behind nearly every Tea Party rally, Koch's deep pockets paid for rewards, travel, and logistics. The Koch octopus has clear rules. Its Heritage Foundation and Cato Institute handle talking points and press releases. Americans for Prosperity hires speakers and organizes crowds. Citizens for Congressional Reform pays participants. A New York Times investigation estimated that at its peak, the Tea Party movement had 18% of Americans' support, but its core membership was only 330,000 people, registered with 6 national groups. This shows that the Tea Party folks seen repeatedly on TV were actually the same bunch, and they were organized and paid. Because their actions got constant media exposure, it built up momentum, masking how they secretly launched Tea Party protests. After being exposed, Koch calmly replied, "I just lit a spark. It'll spread on its own." The second type of operation by the Koch octopus is to dodge regulations and benefit businesses by meddling in industrial policies. The author argues that all Koch's charity labeled activities are driven by boosting Koch Industries' profits. He believes the Koch brothers' style of success isn't admirable at all because their money-making way is different from Bill Gates, who relied on genius and innovation. The Koch brothers depend on breaking rules. In meddling with national industrial policies, the Koch brothers' boldest move was forcibly overturning U.S. carbon emissions policies. The final step is conveying libertarian ideas to the public through street movements. Charles Koch delivered a speech in 1999. He said, "If ideas like liberty and limited government remain confined to ivory towers, even the greatest thoughts become worthless." The Koch octopus uses covert operations to bring these concepts to the streets and win public support. The Tea Party movement is their masterpiece. Tea as in tea leaves, party as in political faction. During Obama's 2 terms, Tea Party protests frequently erupted across major U.S. cities. Tea Party activists, emulating the Boston Tea Party's resistance against British taxes, protested against green energy subsidies and blocked the Affordable Care Act. By demanding federal spending cuts and significant tax reductions, the author reveals these supposedly grassroots movements weren't organic, but largely orchestrated by the Koch brothers. It's artificial activism bankrolled by checks. Behind nearly every rally, Koch money paid participants, covered travel and logistics. The Koch octopus had clear divisions. Heritage Foundation and Cato Institute handled talking points. Americans for Prosperity organized events. Citizens for Congressional Reform distributed payments. A New York Times investigation estimated Tea Party support peaked at 18% of Americans, but its core membership comprised just 330,000 people across 6 national groups. This showed the repeatedly televised Tea Party crowds were actually the same paid, organized individuals. Their constant media exposure created false momentum, masking how they secretly orchestrated protests. When exposed, Koch calmly responded, "I just lit a spark. It'll spread on its own." The Coke Octopus's second strategy was meddling in industrial policies to evade regulations and benefit corporations. The author contends all Coke's charity-labeled activities ultimately served Coke Industries' profits. The third tactic was interfering with scientific research, using money, undermining academic neutrality. The Koch octopus mobilized huge funds into climate science, pressuring institutions to deny global warming. Between 2505 to 2008 alone, the Koch brothers mobilized 140 conservative foundations to fund this campaign. These foundations distributed $558 million to 91 think tanks, advocacy groups, industry associations, and academic programs, funding 5,299 projects that completely shifted the climate science landscape. Oh, the balance of power in the scientific community turned global warming from established consensus back into open debate. Amid media bombardment, Americans believing in global warming plummeted 14% by 2008, with nearly half thinking concerns were exaggerated. So, during his 2 terms, Obama couldn't convince Congress to pass carbon emission restrictions. The initiator, Al Gore, lamented in a New Yorker interview, "Corporate interests hold too much power. Without their approval, any major reform becomes empty talk under this political system." The Koch octopus's third method was directly interfering in presidential, congressional, and state elections to reshape America's political map. The Koch brothers openly stated the White House, the presidency, was their purchase target. To oust carbon restriction supporter Obama, they backed Representative Paul Ryan, Governor Mitt Romney, and Governor Chris Christie as challengers. Though unsuccessful in 2012, Charles Koch's pick, Mike Pence, became Trump's VP in 2016, finally reaching the White House. Even after presidential losses, the Koch brothers never gave up. They leveraged America's separation of powers, meddling in Congress and the Supreme Court to check presidential authority. After the 2008 election loss, they launched an ambitious plan to flood state elections with dark money, flipping Democrat blue states and swing states red. In the 2010 midterm elections, Republicans gained 63 seats in the House and achieved full control over 21 state legislatures and governorships. This grand plan not only cost Democrats control of both congressional chambers, blocking the Affordable Care Act in the Senate, but also forced the act's state-level implementation with restrictive conditions, rendering it ineffective in practice. Dark money makes politicians feel indebted through donations, compelling them to align their policies with the Koch brothers' agenda. This is the ultimate goal of Koch election funding. During the 2012 election, Republican nominee Mitt Romney, originally a staunch environmentalist, changed his stance after, summer meetings at David Koch's beach house with donors. At public rallies, he declared, "My view is we don't know what's causing climate change." Such examples are countless. The author laments, "Candidates are like soccer players with sponsors' names on their jerseys." In this section, we've covered 3 Koch tactics: manufacturing libertarian ideology to reshape political correctness, influencing industrial policy to evade regulation, and meddling in elections to redraw America's political map. Finally, we'll briefly examine how the Koch's dark money damages American democracy. The author argues dark money first undermines democracy's core principle of one person, one vote equality. Wealthy individuals amplify their voices through media buys, manipulating public judgment with manufactured narratives. This reduces democracy to a commodity auctioned to the highest bidder. Second, unlimited, undisclosed dark money devastates elections, democracy's cornerstone. On January 21st, 2010, the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision lifted corporate union political donation limits. Subsequently, individual donation caps were also eliminated. This allows billionaires to fund politicians without restriction, installing them as presidents, congressmen, or governors. In America's inherent political beliefs, campaign funds support governance ideas of parties and politicians, not for direct political rent seeking. To prevent direct ties between political cash and actions, U.S. election law, since the Progressive Era, requires disclosing fund sources and uses for public oversight, banning politicians from directly repaying financial backers. But tax laws under George W. Bush allowed tycoons' charitable funds tax exemption if under 50% went directly to campaigns. This enabled Koch-style networks to obscure money trails through layered foundations for tax avoidance, hiding dark money's flow from public view. Here we've outlined dark money's harm to U.S. democracy through two lenses: one person, one vote equality and election integrity. Finally, two reflections from this book. First, the relationship between interest groups and government in America's political system. We shouldn't view the Kochs as utterly evil conspirators just because of the author's perspective. Industrial capitalists intervening as interest groups is both legal and inevitable in U.S. politics. The author notes Obama criticized Republican donors while courting his own wealthy circle, setting records for presidential fundraising appearances. At a fundraiser with billionaires like Bill Gates, Obama stated publicly, "Tonight, 5 or 6 people in this room could simply decide who becomes the next president." A second reflection: the Kochs amplify their voice but can't silence opponents. In early 2011, Koch donors gathered at a Palm Springs, Florida villa for a January summit, while protesters, including environmental groups, crowded outside. Greenpeace flew a 135-foot neon green airship over the resort, displaying giant Koch brothers portraits and Koch brothers dirty money slogans. Riot police barricaded the resort as diverse protesters waved banners reading "Koch kills," exposing the brothers. As it turns out, in a free market, the Koch brothers couldn't dominate everyone or trick all voters. They never managed to buy the top job at the White House. In the 2016 election, the Koch brothers raised $889 million to back the Republican establishment, but the politicians they backed during the Republican primary stage, they were soundly defeated by Trump. After winning the primaries, Trump vowed to drain the swamp where dark money originates. How will the relationship between dark money and American politics evolve? We'll need to keep observing closely. All right, dark money. That concludes our interpretation of this book. Listening notes are below the audio. We'll see you tomorrow.